private club was quiet, almost too quiet for a place known for its elegance and luxury. Soft lights reflected off crystal glasses, and the polished wooden floors shined under the chandeliers. The gentle hum of conversation floated through the air, but it was never too loud. Guests moved gracefully between tables, their laughter light and controlled, as if they were in a world far removed from the ordinary. Among them, a young waitress carried a tray filled with glasses of sparkling water and carefully balanced plates. She moved smoothly between the tables, her steps measured, her posture perfect, and her expression calm. To anyone watching, she was simply part of the background, a presence that everyone expected but no one really noticed. Her days were long and often tiring, filled with the clinking of glasses, the soft rustle of napkins, and the quiet murmurs of the elite. She had been working at the club for several months, and in that time, she had learned to disappear almost entirely. Her role was simple: serve, smile, and move on. But beneath that calm exterior was a heart that had never stopped dreaming. Music had always been a part of her life. As a child, her father had owned an old, worn piano, and he had taught her to play melodies that filled their small home with warmth. Those moments were brief, fleeting, but they had left a lasting mark. After he passed away and life became harder, she had put her dreams aside, thinking they were too fragile to survive in the real world. The club had a grand piano placed near the lounge area. It was an elegant instrument, polished to a deep shine, and often the centerpiece for special events. Normally, it sat untouched, a symbol of refinement rather than a source of music. Sometimes, hired musicians would play during evenings when the mood needed soft melodies, but most nights it was silent. She would glance at it as she carried trays past, her fingers itching just slightly to touch the keys, to let the music out, even if only for herself. One evening, the club was especially busy. The usual pianist had called in sick, leaving the schedule in disarray. The manager paced behind the bar, muttering under his breath as he tried to rearrange the evening's entertainment. Guests had started arriving early for a private dinner, some of them carrying a sense of expectation that this night would be like all the others. Perfect, elegant, and memorable. But without music, something felt missing. The air seemed heavier, quieter, almost incomplete. The young waitress moved between tables, refilling drinks and taking orders, her mind partially elsewhere. She noticed the manager's unease and the slight frowns on some guests' faces. Music had always been a part of her comfort, and she could see that everyone else felt the absence, even if they didn't know it yet. The grand piano sat there in the corner, silent and waiting, almost as if it knew the tension in the room and longed for someone to play it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of watching the staff scramble, she found herself standing near the manager, who was now frantically speaking to the head of events. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady but careful. She told him she could play the piano. At first, he looked at her as if she had said something impossible. The idea seemed absurd. She was a waitress. She was part of the background. This was not an open night for amateur performances. But the truth in her voice caught him off guard, and after a brief moment of hesitation, he gave a reluctant nod. There was no other choice, and maybe, just maybe, this small spark of courage could work. She walked toward the grand piano, her heart beating faster with each step. Guests glanced over as she passed, some curious, some skeptical. Conversations softened, and the room seemed to hold its breath. She sat down on the bench, her fingers hovering over the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and remembered the old melodies her father had taught her. The weight of her past, the struggles, and the moments of quiet joy came flooding back. She took a deep breath and let her fingers fall onto the keys. The first notes were soft, cautious, as if testing the air. But soon, the music began to flow naturally, as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. Each chord carried emotion, each note a story. Guests stopped talking, their attention drawn to the unexpected sound filling the room. It was not perfect in a formal sense. It was raw, real, and heartfelt, and that authenticity captivated everyone present. Some guests leaned forward in their chairs, their eyes fixed on her hands as they moved gracefully across the piano. Others put down their glasses, completely absorbed in the melody. Even the manager, who had been tense and worried, found himself standing still, listening, unable to tear his gaze away. The music told a story of quiet struggle, hope, and resilience, and though no one knew the details, they could feel its truth. Minutes passed like seconds, and the young waitress continued playing, her confidence growing with each measure. She was no longer the invisible staff member. She was the center of attention, the source of beauty in a room that had felt incomplete. She could see the subtle changes in the guests' expressions. Smiles forming, heads nodding in rhythm, eyes glistening with emotion. The energy in the room shifted, becoming warmer, more alive, as if the music had awakened something hidden in everyone present. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, savoring the end of the melody. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. At first, hesitant, then growing louder and more confident, until it filled the room completely. Guests stood, some clapping enthusiastically, others wiping tears from their eyes. The manager looked at her in astonishment, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. The same people who had barely noticed her before were now praising her talent, asking questions, and expressing admiration. An older guest, a man known for his influence in the arts community, approached her with a warm smile. He asked where she had trained, expecting to hear the name of a prestigious music school. She shook her head gently and said she had learned at home. There was no pretension in her answer, no attempt to impress. She simply spoke the truth, and it only added to the wonder of what they had just experienced. Word of her performance began to spread almost immediately. Guests mentioned it to friends, shared it on social media, and even the staff talked about it in hushed tones, amazed that someone so seemingly ordinary could possess such extraordinary skill. The young waitress, however, remained humble, returning to her duties quietly, though her heart was light with a sense of accomplishment she had not felt in years. The music had not only filled the room but also opened a door within her, reminding her that her dreams, though long postponed, were still alive. The evening continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Guests lingered longer, conversations flowed more easily, and the space felt alive with warmth and connection. The piano, once silent and overlooked, had become a symbol of possibility, of hidden potential waiting to be discovered. And in the midst of it all, she moved through the room with her usual grace, but now with a quiet confidence that came from knowing that she had shared something truly special. As the night came to an end, she cleaned up the remaining glasses and plates, her mind replaying the music she had played and the reactions she had witnessed. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that for a brief moment, she had transformed the ordinary into something unforgettable. The grand piano remained in the corner, silent again, but it no longer felt empty. It had been given a voice through her, a voice that told a story of resilience, talent, and quiet determination. Walking home later, she thought about her father and the small lessons he had taught her so long ago. She realized that the music she had carried in her heart had not been lost, only waiting for the right moment to emerge. That night, she had found more than applause. She had found validation, courage, and the beginning of a new chapter. And though she returned to work the next day with trays and orders, a part of her remained forever changed, carrying the memory of that night and the knowledge that sometimes, the most extraordinary things are hidden in the most ordinary places. The morning after her unexpected performance at the club, the young waitress woke early, her mind still buzzing from the events of the night before. She had spent hours replaying the music, the faces of the guests, and the applause that had seemed to echo inside her chest. It was difficult to sleep well, not because she was tired, but because her thoughts were full of possibilities she had never dared to consider. Could this really be the start of something different? Or was it just a fleeting moment, one night where luck and courage had met perfectly? As she walked to the club that morning, carrying the same tray and wearing the same uniform, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. The staff greeted her as usual, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity in their voices. Some smiled knowingly, while others whispered among themselves, glancing toward her as if expecting something to happen again. Even the manager, who normally maintained a professional distance, looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, half surprise, half admiration, and perhaps a little worry about what her talent could mean for the club. The moment she stepped into the lounge, she noticed something different. The grand piano, which had been an overlooked piece of furniture for months, now seemed almost to shine, as if it remembered the music from the night before. She felt her fingers tingle at the thought of touching the keys again, but she quickly reminded herself that today she was just a waitress, and the music she had played had been enough for now. There was no time to dwell on what might come next. She had orders to take, tables to clear, and guests to serve. But the guests themselves seemed to carry a memory of her performance. A group of regulars, seated near the corner of the room, nodded in her direction and smiled, commenting quietly among themselves about how they had been surprised and moved the previous evening. A young woman leaned forward, asking if she had played professionally before. She simply shook her head, giving a small, humble smile. The questions, the curiosity, it all made her heart race in ways she had not experienced before. She was becoming aware of the ripple effect of her music, and the realization was both thrilling and terrifying. By mid-morning, the manager called her aside. He looked serious, but there was a spark of something else in his eyes. He told her that a guest from the night before had requested to meet her privately. She felt her stomach tighten with nerves, unsure of what to expect. Was this a compliment? An offer? Something more complicated? She followed him to a quiet corner of the club, where a man in his 60s waited, his suit perfectly pressed and his posture dignified. This was the same patron who had watched her so closely the night before, his eyes following her fingers across the piano with an intensity that had made her feel seen in a way few people ever had. He introduced himself, speaking with a voice that carried authority but also warmth. He told her that he was impressed, not just with her skill, but with the way her music conveyed emotion, telling stories without words. He asked if she had ever considered performing publicly, and when she shook her head, he encouraged her to try. He explained that there were opportunities for someone with her raw talent, but only if she was willing to take a risk and step out of the safety of her familiar world. She left the meeting feeling both exhilarated and terrified. She had never imagined that anyone would recognize the value of her talent beyond the small space of her family home or the brief practice sessions at night. The idea of performing for strangers, of being judged and evaluated, seemed overwhelming. And yet, there was a small spark inside her that whispered that this was a chance she could not ignore. Something deep within her told her that the life she had known, the long shifts, the quiet service, the hidden talent, was ready for change. The following days were a whirlwind. The story of her performance spread quietly at first, then more broadly as a few guests mentioned it to friends and colleagues. A short video from the night of her playing surfaced online, showing her hands moving gracefully across the keys, her expression serene yet passionate. Views and comments began to pour in, many expressing amazement that a simple waitress could possess such skill. The attention was unexpected and intimidating. Some people she knew at work expressed concern, warning her not to let her pride get the better of her. Others encouraged her to embrace the opportunity, reminding her that talent like hers was rare and should not be hidden. Each day, she found herself standing in front of the grand piano during quiet moments, her fingers hovering over the keys, imagining the melodies she could play. But fear always crept in first, the fear of failing, the fear of judgment, the fear of losing herself in a world that was suddenly so much larger and more complex. She questioned whether she was ready, whether she was truly deserving of this attention, and whether stepping into the spotlight would ruin the safe, ordinary life she had built for herself. One afternoon, the manager approached her with a hesitant smile. He explained that another guest, a wealthy patron with connections to the arts community, wanted to hear her play for a private gathering. He emphasized that it was not a formal audition but a chance to share her music with people who could help her career grow. She felt a knot in her stomach. Accepting would mean stepping out of her comfort zone in a way she had never experienced. But refusing would mean closing the door on an opportunity she had longed for since childhood. After long contemplation, she agreed. The decision did not come easily. She spent the next few days practicing in secret, revisiting old pieces she had learned from her father and creating new melodies from her own imagination. Her hands, once hesitant, began to move with confidence and purpose. Each day, the music felt more like an extension of herself, a language that spoke when words could not. The night of the private gathering arrived. She dressed carefully, choosing something simple but elegant, nothing that would distract from the music itself. The guests arrived, many of them familiar from the club, but most were strangers. She felt the weight of their expectations pressing down, their polite smiles and polite conversation, a stark contrast to the intensity she felt inside. The grand piano awaited her, polished and ready, a silent partner in this new adventure. When she began to play, the initial notes were hesitant, a soft testing of the waters. But soon, as she felt the energy of the room, the music began to flow naturally. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that drew the audience in. The melodies carried emotion, conveying her story, her struggles, and her quiet determination. Conversations ceased. Guests leaned in, their attention fixed on her every movement. The atmosphere shifted from polite curiosity to complete immersion. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a waitress, not as an employee, but as an artist capable of touching the hearts of those around her. The applause at the end of the performance was immediate and heartfelt. Guests stood, some with tears in their eyes, others simply smiling in awe. Compliments and inquiries followed, many expressing astonishment that someone with her background could possess such extraordinary talent. The feeling of validation was overwhelming, yet humbling. She realized that the music had not only touched the audience but had also transformed her own understanding of herself and what she was capable of. In the days that followed, she received invitations to play at other gatherings and small events. Each invitation brought new excitement but also renewed anxiety. The balance between her ordinary life and this new world of music was delicate. She continued to work her shifts at the club, serving guests with her usual poise, while privately nurturing the opportunities that were beginning to open before her. Each performance reinforced her belief that music was not just a pastime, but a calling that demanded courage, persistence, and faith in oneself. Throughout this period, she discovered more about the power of her own resilience. She realized that fear was not an enemy but a companion that reminded her of the stakes, the importance of every choice, and the value of stepping forward despite uncertainty. She began to understand that her talent, once hidden and unappreciated, could inspire others, bridge gaps between different worlds, and create moments of shared human connection. The piano, once a silent piece of furniture in the club, had become a bridge between her past and her future, a tool through which she could express the depths of her experiences. Her life had not completely changed overnight. She still navigated the routines of daily work, still carried trays and took orders, and still dealt with the quiet judgment of those who could not see past her position. But now, she moved through the world with a subtle, growing confidence. She had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. She had taken the first steps into a life that promised both challenges and rewards, and she was ready to see where it would lead. The risk she had taken, the decision to play in front of strangers to expose her talent, had set in motion a series of events that she could not have predicted. She was no longer invisible, and while that brought new pressures, it also brought opportunities and a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. She knew that more challenges lay ahead, that the path would not always be easy, and that she would need to continue finding the courage to embrace her music fully. But for the first time in a long time, she felt that she was truly on her way, guided by the melodies that had always lived quietly within her and now had a chance to flourish. After her private performance, the young waitress's life felt like it had entered a new rhythm. She still worked her usual shifts at the club, serving drinks and carrying plates, but the air around her had changed. Staff members whispered quietly when she passed, and some guests seemed to look at her differently, as though seeing not the uniform she wore but the person she truly was. The music she had played had left a lasting impression, and word of her talent began to spread far beyond the walls of the lounge. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the club, addressed specifically to her. She opened it with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Inside was an invitation to perform at a small charity gala. The event would be attended by influential figures in the arts community, some of whom were known worldwide for their support of musicians. This was more than she had ever imagined. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the details, and she realized that the time had come to step further into the world she had only glimpsed before. Preparation for the gala became her focus. She spent long hours practicing in her small apartment, revisiting old pieces her father had taught her and experimenting with new melodies she created herself. She wanted to be ready, not just to play notes on a piano, but to tell a story through her music. Each evening, as she played, she felt a sense of release and freedom, as if the piano itself understood her heart and spoke with her voice. The music had always been a refuge, but now it was also a bridge to a future she had never dared to imagine. As the day of the gala approached, anxiety and anticipation grew. She worried about whether she would be able to convey her emotions effectively, whether the audience would understand the meaning behind each note. But with every doubt, there was also a spark of courage. She reminded herself that she had already faced skepticism and fear before, and that each performance had strengthened her resolve. This time, the stakes were higher, but so was her determination. The evening of the gala arrived, and she entered the grand hall with a mixture of awe and nerves. The room was magnificent, filled with chandeliers, soft lighting, and tables elegantly set for dinner. Guests in formal attire chatted quietly, their attention divided between conversations and the anticipation of the evening's entertainment. She felt a twinge of self-consciousness as she walked past them, aware of the disparity between her own modest appearance and the grandeur of the surroundings. But the moment she approached the piano, a calm settled over her. The keys beneath her fingers felt familiar and comforting, grounding her in the present. When she began to play, the room fell silent. The first notes were delicate, tentative, but as she continued, her confidence grew. The melodies wove a tapestry of emotion, each chord carrying the weight of her past struggles and the hope of new beginnings. Guests leaned forward, captivated by the authenticity and depth of her performance. Unlike performances she had seen before, this was not about technical perfection alone. It was about connection, about creating a moment where music could touch hearts and transcend words. Her gaze occasionally met the eyes of the audience, and she saw expressions of wonder, admiration, and emotion. Some guests had tears in their eyes, while others simply watched, absorbed and quiet. The energy in the room shifted, as if the music had cast a spell, creating a shared experience that transcended social status or expectation. For her, the realization was profound. Her music had the power to move people in ways she had never fully understood before. As the final notes lingered in the air, there was a moment of profound silence. Then, slowly, the applause began, soft at first and then swelling into a wave of appreciation that filled the hall. The young waitress rose to a standing ovation, her heart pounding with emotion. She felt a mixture of relief, joy, and gratitude. In that moment, she understood that her life was shifting irrevocably, and that the choices she had made to embrace her talent had led to this unforgettable experience. After the performance, several guests approached her with kind words and genuine admiration. One man, a well-known patron of the arts, expressed his amazement at her ability to convey so much feeling without words. He spoke about opportunities for young musicians and suggested that she consider formal training to further develop her talent. Another guest, a composer, offered to mentor her and introduce her to others in the music world. Each interaction reinforced the idea that her music could open doors she had never imagined, and that the world beyond the club was ready to listen. Despite the excitement and recognition, she remained grounded. She knew that talent alone was not enough. Perseverance, practice, and humility were equally important. The applause and accolades were gratifying, but they were also a reminder of responsibility. She wanted her music to continue to speak truthfully, to touch lives, and to honor the lessons she had learned from her father and from the struggles that had shaped her. In the days following the gala, invitations continued to arrive. People wanted to hear her play at private events, charity functions, and small concerts. Each opportunity required careful consideration. She had to balance her work at the club with the growing demand for her music, and each decision carried weight. Yet, with every performance, she felt more confident, more capable, and more certain that she was following a path that was meant for her. She began to understand that her story resonated not just because of her skill, but because of her journey. People admired her not only for the music she played, but for the courage she had shown in stepping into the spotlight despite fear and uncertainty. Her life, once defined by routine and invisibility, was now a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of taking risks, and the beauty of sharing one's gifts with the world. Her relationship with the club also evolved. The manager who had once doubted her now spoke of her performances with pride, introducing her to guests as someone whose talent had transformed ordinary evenings into unforgettable experiences. Colleagues watched with admiration, some inspired to explore their own hidden abilities. Even as she continued her daily responsibilities, the club became a place where her music could flourish, bridging her past and future in a seamless way. Throughout this period, she learned to navigate the pressures of growing recognition. She encountered moments of self-doubt, wondering whether she was ready for the attention and expectations that came with each invitation. But she reminded herself that every challenge was part of the journey, that fear was not a barrier but a signal of growth, and that her music was a language through which she could communicate the depths of her experiences. The grand piano, once a silent fixture in the club, had become an instrument of transformation. Each time she played, it was as if the instrument itself acknowledged the journey she had undertaken, the risks she had taken, and the resilience she had demonstrated. The music connected her to audiences in ways that transcended words, creating moments of shared humanity and understanding. She began to recognize that her story was about more than just talent. It was about the quiet strength that exists in those who persevere, the courage to step forward when the world does not expect it, and the power of authenticity. Her music became a reflection of her life, each note carrying the weight of her experiences, her hopes, and her dreams. The audience did not simply hear the melodies. They felt them, and in doing so, they became part of her journey. As the weeks passed, she continued to perform, each experience shaping her confidence and skill. She learned to trust herself, to embrace both the nerves and the excitement that came with stepping into the spotlight. The recognition she received was not an endpoint but a beginning, opening doors to new possibilities and opportunities. She realized that the music had given her not only a way to express herself but also a path to a future she had never dared to imagine. Through it all, she remained humble, aware of the privilege of being able to share her talent and the responsibility it carried. She understood that each performance was an opportunity to connect, to inspire, and to create moments that would linger in the hearts of those who listened. Her life, once confined to the routines of a quiet club, had expanded into a world where her music could reach and move people in profound ways. The young waitress who had once been unnoticed had become something more than she had ever imagined. Not because she had changed, but because the world had finally begun to see her for who she truly was. Her talent, courage, and authenticity had created a bridge between her past and her future, transforming both her life and the lives of those who experienced her music. And as she prepared for each new performance, she carried with her the knowledge that her journey was just beginning, that her music had the power to touch hearts, and that the courage to step forward could change everything. After the gala, the young waitress found herself in a world she had only dreamed of. Invitations to perform at private events, charity functions, and small concerts began arriving steadily. Each new opportunity was exciting but also daunting. She had to navigate unfamiliar spaces, balancing her work at the club with these unexpected offers. Some days she felt exhilarated by the attention and possibilities, while other days doubt crept in, whispering that she was not ready, that she might fail, or that she might lose herself in the pursuit of recognition. Despite the nerves, she committed herself fully to each performance. She prepared meticulously, practicing long hours in her small apartment, experimenting with new compositions, and refining her technique. Her music had always been an expression of her inner world, but now it was also a bridge to new connections and experiences. She realized that every performance was an opportunity not just to play notes, but to share a piece of herself, her journey, and her story with others. One afternoon, a call came from a local music foundation offering her a scholarship to study formally. She felt a mixture of joy and apprehension. Formal training had been a distant dream, something she thought she could never afford or achieve. Yet now it was within reach. Accepting the scholarship would mean committing to a path she had never walked before, leaving behind the comfort and familiarity of her previous life. After careful thought, she decided to accept. The decision marked a turning point, a moment when she fully embraced the possibility of a new chapter in her life. Her studies brought new challenges. She learned techniques and theories she had never encountered, practiced rigorously, and pushed herself beyond her comfort zone. It was demanding, sometimes exhausting, but she found immense satisfaction in her progress. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, discipline, and persistence were essential. Each lesson, each practice session, reinforced her commitment to her music and her belief in herself. Meanwhile, her performances continued. She played at charity events, private gatherings, and occasionally at the club where she had once been just a waitress. Each venue had its own atmosphere and audience, and she learned to adapt her playing to suit the mood and expectations. Some nights she felt nervous, worried that she might not meet the expectations of her audience. Other nights, she felt a surge of confidence, the music flowing effortlessly from her fingers, creating a shared experience that moved both her and the listeners. The recognition she received was overwhelming at times. People were genuinely interested in her story, asking about her journey, her inspiration, and how she had discovered her talent. She spoke humbly, sharing the truth about her upbringing, the lessons her father had taught her, and the perseverance that had brought her this far. Her authenticity resonated with people, inspiring others to pursue their own passions, even when circumstances seemed difficult or uncertain. As her schedule became busier, she faced decisions about how to manage her time and commitments. She had to prioritize certain performances and decline others, a process that required careful thought and courage. She began to understand that success was not just about talent or opportunity, but about making choices that aligned with her values and goals. She learned to trust her instincts, to listen to her intuition, and to embrace the challenges and responsibilities that came with her growing reputation. Despite the increasing demands, she remained connected to the club that had been her starting point. She continued to perform there occasionally, not as a waitress, but as a featured musician. The manager introduced her to guests with pride, and the staff watched with admiration as she transformed the space with her music. Returning to the club was a reminder of how far she had come, and it kept her grounded, reminding her of the journey that had led to her present success. Her performances began to attract media attention as well. Local newspapers and online publications featured her story, celebrating the remarkable journey of a young woman who had transitioned from serving tables to performing for elite audiences. While the attention was flattering, it also brought pressure. She learned to handle interviews and public appearances, always striving to remain true to herself and her music. She understood that her story was powerful not because of fame or accolades, but because it represented courage, resilience, and authenticity. Amidst the growing attention, she found moments of quiet reflection. In her apartment, sitting at her own piano, she played for herself, exploring melodies without an audience, reconnecting with the joy and freedom that had first drawn her to music. These moments were essential, allowing her to maintain balance, to nurture her creativity, and to remember why she loved to play. Music was not just a means to an end. It was an expression of her soul, a source of comfort and inspiration, and a way to connect with others on a profound level. Her confidence and skill grew with each experience, and so did her understanding of what it meant to be a musician. She learned that performance was not only about playing the right notes, but about conveying emotion, telling a story, and creating a connection with the audience. She discovered the subtle power of silence, the importance of pacing, and the way music could communicate what words sometimes could not. Every performance became a dialogue between her and her listeners, an exchange of feelings, ideas, and human connection. Through it all, she remained humble. She remembered the long hours of work at the club, the quiet evenings spent practicing alone, and the simple lessons from her father. She understood that her talent was a gift, one that carried responsibility. She wanted to use it not for self-glorification, but to touch lives, inspire others, and create moments of shared humanity. Each performance was a chance to honor that gift and to continue growing as both a musician and a person. Her story inspired those around her. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers admired her courage, dedication, and authenticity. She became a symbol of perseverance, showing that with talent, hard work, and a willingness to take risks, it was possible to transform one's life. Yet she remained relatable, approachable, and grounded, never losing sight of the ordinary life she had once known and the lessons that had shaped her. As her reputation continued to grow, she began to consider larger opportunities. She thought about composing original pieces, collaborating with other musicians, and expanding her reach beyond private events. The future was full of possibilities, and while uncertainty remained, she faced it with confidence, knowing that each step forward was a continuation of the journey she had started long ago. The piano, once a silent fixture in a club, had become a bridge to her dreams, a companion on her path, and a tool through which she could express herself fully. Even as she looked toward the future, she valued each moment, understanding that the journey itself was as important as the destination. She cherished the quiet mornings of practice, the small gestures of appreciation from listeners, and the simple pleasure of playing music that moved her heart. She knew that success was not measured only by recognition or accolades, but by the ability to remain true to oneself and to share one's gifts meaningfully with the world. Through dedication, courage, and authenticity, she had transformed her life in ways she had never imagined. The young woman who had once been a quiet waitress in a luxury club was now a rising musician, celebrated not only for her skill, but for the honesty and emotion she brought to her performances. Her journey was a testament to the power of hidden talent, perseverance, and the willingness to take risks when opportunities arise. Each new performance, each connection made, and each challenge faced became a building block in the life she was creating. A life defined not by circumstances, but by her choices, her courage, and her music. In this period of growth and transformation, she realized that the most important lessons were not about fame or recognition, but about belief in oneself, the importance of persistence, and the courage to step into the unknown. Her journey reminded her and those around her that talent alone is not enough. It is the combination of dedication, passion, and willingness to embrace opportunities that truly creates remarkable outcomes. And through it all, her music remained the constant, guiding force, shaping her path, and touching the hearts of everyone who had the privilege to hear it. Months passed, and the young woman who had once been a quiet waitress now stood at the threshold of a life she had never dared to imagine. Each day brought new performances, new connections, and new challenges. Invitations to play at concerts, charity events, and private gatherings continued to arrive. While the attention was flattering, she never allowed it to define her. She remained focused on the music itself, on the joy of creating something that could move others, and on the lessons she had learned along the way. Her time at the club gradually shifted. She no longer worked full-time as a waitress but returned occasionally to perform special evenings. The manager introduced her as a featured musician, and the staff watched with admiration, some quietly inspired to pursue their own talents. The club, once a place of routine and quiet labor, had become a bridge between her past and her evolving future. Each performance there was a reminder of where she had come from, and it kept her grounded even as her life changed around her. With every concert and private performance, her confidence and skill grew. She began composing her own pieces, blending her personal experiences with the melodies that had always lived in her heart. Her music became more expressive, more nuanced, and richer with emotion. Audiences were captivated not just by her technical skill, but by the honesty and depth of feeling she conveyed. Each note told a story, each pause invited reflection, and each chord resonated with the shared human experience. she also discovered the importance of balance. Fame and recognition brought pressure, and the demands of travel, preparation, and performance could be exhausting. Yet she never lost sight of the moments that grounded her. Quiet mornings practicing alone, the simple pleasure of exploring new melodies, and the satisfaction of a well-played piece. She understood that success was not only about accolades or applause, but about the fulfillment that came from pursuing her passion fully and authentically. Her family, though distant in the past, became a source of pride and connection. She would call relatives to share her experiences, her excitement, and even her fears. Her father's lessons on music and perseverance had guided her in ways she had not fully appreciated until now. She carried his memory with her in every performance, honoring the guidance and love he had given her. The music that had once been a private sanctuary became a bridge to the wider world, carrying the essence of her life story to every listener. One particularly memorable evening, she returned to the club to perform for a special private gathering. The grand piano, which had once seemed a silent, decorative piece, now stood as a familiar friend and a symbol of her journey. As she played, she felt a wave of gratitude and reflection. The audience was captivated, and she noticed subtle smiles, quiet nods, and even tears in the eyes of some guests. She realized that her music had become a language that transcended words, a way to communicate emotion and experience directly to the hearts of others. The recognition she had received continued to grow, but she never allowed herself to become complacent. She sought new challenges, learning from other musicians, experimenting with different styles, and exploring the depths of her own creativity. Each new performance was an opportunity to refine her craft, to connect more deeply with audiences, and to continue expressing the full range of her emotions through music. She understood that mastery was not a destination, but a journey, and she embraced every step with humility and dedication. Through her growing career, she also began to mentor others. Young musicians who were struggling to find their voice or the courage to perform sought her guidance. She shared her story openly, emphasizing the importance of perseverance, authenticity, and the willingness to take risks. Her journey became an inspiration, showing that talent could flourish even in unlikely circumstances if one had the courage to pursue it and the dedication to develop it. She found joy in helping others discover their own potential and in witnessing the transformative power of music in their lives. Despite her busy schedule and growing reputation, she remained deeply connected to her roots. She continued to visit the club, sometimes just to play for herself, sometimes for special evenings. The familiar space, the sounds, and even the routine of her old work reminded her of her journey and the small steps that had led to this point. It grounded her, reminding her that her success was built on a foundation of perseverance, practice, and authenticity. She also learned to embrace the unexpected. Opportunities arose that she could not have predicted. Invitations to collaborate with other artists, requests to perform at international events, and chances to share her music with broader audiences. Each new experience brought excitement, but also the responsibility to stay true to herself. She realized that authenticity was her most powerful tool, and that her music resonated most when it reflected her genuine experiences, emotions, and perspective. One evening, after performing a new composition she had written, she sat quietly by the piano, reflecting on her journey. She remembered the long hours of work at the club, the quiet nights of practice, and the first time she had dared to play for the guests. She thought of the people who had supported her, challenged her, and inspired her along the way. She realized that her journey was not just about music, but about courage, growth, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. Her story became a symbol of hope for many. People admired her not only for her talent, but for the way she had navigated obstacles, faced fears, and stayed true to herself. She demonstrated that remarkable talent could exist in unexpected places, and that with perseverance and courage, it could transform not just one's own life, but also the lives of those who experienced it. She had become more than a musician. She had become a beacon of inspiration and a living example of the power of following one's passion. In her daily life, she maintained a sense of humility and gratitude. She understood that her journey was shaped by both her effort and the opportunities she had been given. She continued to play for the joy of music itself, finding comfort, expression, and connection in every note. She remembered the lessons of her father, the support of mentors, and the courage it had taken to step forward when no one expected her to. Each day was an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to share the gift of her music with the world. As her career continued to flourish, she reflected on the extraordinary journey she had undertaken. From a quiet waitress unnoticed in the background, she had become a celebrated musician, admired for her skill, authenticity, and emotional depth. She had faced fear, doubt, and uncertainty, but had emerged stronger, more confident, and more capable. Her life had transformed, not through luck alone, but through talent, perseverance, and the courage to embrace opportunity when it appeared. Her performances remained deeply human, filled with emotion, story, and connection. She understood that music was not just about skill, but about the ability to communicate, to touch hearts, and to create moments of shared understanding. She cherished each audience, each interaction, and each note played, knowing that her journey was not only about her own growth, but also about the impact she could have on others through her music. The grand piano at the club, which had once been a silent witness to her quiet life, now stood as a symbol of her journey. It had been the starting point of her transformation, the instrument through which her hidden talent had first been revealed. Returning to play there, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and reflection. It reminded her of the courage it took to step into the unknown, the joy of discovering her own potential, and the importance of staying true to herself. Her story, once private and hidden, had become a source of inspiration for many. She had shown that talent could be found in unexpected places, and that courage, perseverance, and authenticity could transform even the most ordinary circumstances into extraordinary opportunities. She continued to perform, to learn, and to grow, carrying with her the lessons of her past, the joy of her present, and the promise of her future. In the end, she understood that her journey was about more than music. It was about resilience, belief in oneself, and the willingness to embrace life's possibilities. Her music became a reflection of her life, her struggles, her triumphs, and her humanity. Each performance, each composition, each moment of connection was a celebration of the journey she had undertaken, the courage she had shown, and the extraordinary life she had created from humble beginnings. She knew that the path ahead would continue to bring challenges and opportunities, but she faced them with confidence, humility, and determination. Her story was a reminder that the most remarkable talent can be hidden in the most ordinary places, and that all it takes is one brave moment to reveal it to the world. And so, she played on, not just for recognition, but for the joy of music, the connection it created, and the life it had allowed her to build. A life full of possibility, authenticity, and beauty.